lighthouse keeper or revealing of artistic methodology. Preamble. Amsterdam City Metro train moved to Hampstead station quickly with 1 minute stop. The passenger looked out of the window and saw the front of the student living complex, where the windows were lit. In one of these windows he saw the apartment, but it was unlikely that the passenger knew what was happening inside. There, a young man stood in front of the mirror late at night in the bathroom. There was cropped hair everywhere in the sink and toilet, freshly cut. He worked with small scissors and carefully selected newfound proportions. His condition could have been described as trance, neurotic, and obsessive. It was the second hour of this procedure. This young man was an artist. He never told anyone about his haircut sessions. Or maybe a couple of times. Though close people noticed it, they knew that something was wrong. The guy had nervous breakdown. Evaluation and ambivalence point of view. Often in life we use evaluation of things. However, these assessments are subjective and all come from our minds nor hearts, and it's easy to judge. Much has been said before me and I have nothing to add. This is something of a common position in the postmodern era. But despite this, very important old things are forgotten and they are waiting for us and in you guys, when it seems that everything has already happened. I suddenly remember when I was a kid and how internet web came along. At first it was very difficult to explore, to find anything. It was before the information exuberance. I was looking for a movie as they could scarcely have been found. Later I watched them in very low quality resolution. I listened to tons of music in low quality format on almost destroyed cassette tapes. How precious to me were these artifacts, these unknown pleasures. Paradoxically, the playback quality was so low, but I was so impressed and felt like I was saved by those findings. They were real treasures. I tend to think that the main human trait is the structural mythical power of imagination that could arise. We need myths to survive and want to hear inspiring stories. We need daily touch of phenomena. I say we, but of course I mean myself. I needed strong background and suitable philosophy in my case. There is an abyss of misunderstanding between us, and it's great that we interact and believe in collective terms, such as art. For many of us, art became a symbol of intellectual interaction in the post-industrial digital era. It's more or less dualistic and it helps with fairing. Artists, poets, thinkers, some of them strive to keep poetic status of human life. And this craving for self-expression and freedom for intellectual levitation in general as a research is more than science. It's all about feelings, concepts and emotions. They are invisible and usually hidden. There is nothing more sensuous than the spiritualized language of things. So for me it gives subtle means of communication with the world and the way to know the world by knowing myself. I talk through what I'm doing. This is the only way for me to come here in dialectical material world. And that's why I'm talking in this thesis mostly about keystones of my methodology. Nomadic genes and lust for wandering. With the first major steps in life, wandering was also an act of escape. It was both an attitude and a means. The vagabond's life was in bloom. On the road again, the Dharma bumps and Jack Kerouac were flashed like a comet. Life, travel, adventure, bless, and don't be sorry. Live from everywhere, only to remain in movement and go for the hidden unseen goal as horizon moves far with each strive. Not to trample again where everything is already trampled down. The wanderer couldn't have done other way. He wouldn't have left these meanings and spaces forever rather than give up his nomadic position. He couldn't sit still when he was young, forever young, useless everywhere, as he didn't fit tendencies and traditions and common sense. We were shackled in bodies doomed to decay and aging. We were shackled in squabbles full of dangers and anxieties. We were only allowed to be here temporarily in the midst of this human bedlam, and we still, in these little conditions, in these terrible human hands we made it. We made legends, myths and monsters. They looked at us, because we were undermining their order, where every cog is just a cog, where their divided classes and castes exist and thrive, where there is their own and others, where there is a struggle for resources, for comfort and a place in the sun. They raised it to such an extent that the planet was overgrown with anger. The planet has become a place for them, but not for us. They pressed us every second. Not only that, they pretended to be outraged. You suddenly remember how years ago you were wondering just when you will fight again in your life, in a cruel, painful and terrible bloody fight for life and death, where all the techniques against the enemy are good, either you or him. This question came to you in moments of serenity and comprehension of yourself in a comfort zone. You ask yourself, whether this moment will arise? The whole life was a struggle, in a sense you had to fight for yourself and for your interests, but mostly until absurd. Some of the interests were common and had a designation, a label. Others, on the contrary, were only from our perspective, from your perspective or dream, and took place where no one claimed. You were looking for your own field and niche, and it was desirable that no one else claimed it. The niche that no one else took into his head to aspire and to discover. And you found it in primitivism and naivety. No one wanted your area anymore. You didn't need anyone, and it became self-sufficient without any need of interaction. A gloomy philosopher inside a dark box of existence. Yes, back to the days it was dark. The idea of suicide as a tool of controlling reality. You intended to commit it mostly when you were in your 20s, but quite suddenly, both for you and for the frowning world, you were open to the cross you were carrying, silly rebelling against it. You became more industrious, luminous, innovative, transcendent, calm, equal, and steady to life to the questions of meaning. You were still weak, but not that desperate anymore. Maybe after days of fasting, maybe after Berdyaev's article about suicidal tendencies of Russian intelligentsia abroad in 19th century, maybe after everything you have endured. But you became much more peaceful, and even as if you had overcome an unknown craving in yourself and gave it in return for the craving of yourself. It gave you madness, like in Friedrich Nietzsche's case, a peace, a chance to survive, a chance of status, invisible self-controlled pet. You pushed off from the bottom like superhuman, and it was just an episode. As uncertainty gives birth to inferiority, inferiority from which you just want to withdraw, to hide yourself in this dungeon, sobbing so no one could see it. Remove the mask, break it, inferiority due to play, due to materiality. After all, a person is imprisoned between two worlds. The soul is imprisoned due to human boundaries. It is as if no one grasps the sublime facets, the mirages, the things that seem to remember and experience, but all that is an unsteady thing that going to pass through. All you need is an illusion of endless control of your life. Like Emil Cioran, whom only you trusted back then, once said, the only thing that kept me alive was constant idea that I can finish it all at any moment. Being on the verge, being on an extreme point, feeling the global stream of existence despite being split inside. Singing for the Lord. Music was the only evidence that life wasn't a mistake. It's so important in the process of falling down, not to remember boring, gloomy, evil faces and sing your favorite song out loud. A song of truth and emancipation, a song of different approach to life, a song of awakening. From the love of God. For the love of God. Every time you write it and record it, you're in a trance state. You can oblige yourself to write a song, a melody or lyrics. It comes to you as a cosmic wave, as a mood, as an idea, and you're putting things off as a conductor. So you made a lot of DIY stuff. You were attracted by the simplicity and potential of bedroom recordings, always keeping in mind German poet George Trakl, who wrote his poem with 12 words, with avoiding compromises that usually follow each encounter. You felt brutal, sloppy to make a contrast, huge connection of arts through typology of means of expression, and always wanted to see mistakes in your work. This was the most meaningful battle with inferiority, perhaps even a contest with reality, with objectivity and evaluation. The only way for bizarre, deviation. Deviation was a powerful engine and stimulus. It was closer to the horizon than anything else. Push the boundaries, trust yourself in all weird implications. Of course, it was the center of inner conflict. It is always the hardest thing to prove here on the planet, the right to the existence of a new species, especially if that kind is you. Sometimes it seemed that it was considered as an endangered species. Sometimes it seems that it is shrinking and dying for good reasons. The species couldn't find itself on another planet, in another spectacle someday, millions of years later, but the situation was here and now, and deviation was a confirmation of different nature. Confirmation of itself, and the only proof it was, and no matter how they tried to separate it from other beings, calling it a joke, a tall tale, an artificial imitation and simulacra, it had been that way for a long time. Other examples halted much, examples of true glory. When you needed to help yourself to survive, you turned to them. You were inspired by people who didn't do very well. These people were real white crows. But in the end, despite the rather difficult past, they managed to survive and defend their right to be called a decent part of something else. They were remembered from time to time. You didn't mind. Will they remember you or not? Sometimes you wanted to get rid of it. It wasn't even a vanity. It was just hard to accept that everything was so pointless.